Hello, friends. Once again, we find ourselves at a crossroads of words, where declarations and denials twist together in a surreal political dance. The man wanted by the International Criminal Court, Vladimir Putin, recently said he doesn't consider himself responsible for the deaths that have occurred. "We are not responsible," he insists, "because we didn't start this war." And yet, his own voice from 2022 echoes across the years. "I have decided to conduct a special military operation." One and the same person, on one side claiming innocence, on the other proudly announcing the very act he now denies. Two realities colliding in one mind. That year, in 2022, he stood firm and confident. "I made the decision. I begin the special operation." The message was simple and loud. The world should stand still, because Russia was on the move. Soldiers were told to pack their parade uniforms. "We'll be in Kiev in 3 days," they were promised. The belief was that the Ukrainian capital would fall before the week ended, that by evening, a parade would march triumphantly down Kreshchatik. Fast forward to 2025, and the tone has changed completely. Now, the narrative says it was never their war, that they were tricked, provoked, deceived. But history, as we know, has a long memory. The justification continues to shift.
This war began, Putin now says, after the unconstitutional coup in Ukraine in 2014, conveniently forgetting his own televised declaration of intent to invade. Time has passed, and even his once fiery rhetoric now sounds weary. The strong man who once promised victory now blames others for the chaos he created. You can almost sense the exhaustion, not just of the man, but of the entire system built on constant denial. "We only responded," he says. "We didn't start it." But his own orders, his own words, tell another story. The so-called special operation began with a plan to seize the Hostomel airport, to airlift troops and vehicles directly into Kiev. The plan was supposed to be flawless. It was, as officials like to say, as reliable as a Swiss knife. Yet it unraveled within hours. Soldiers were lost, equipment destroyed, and the dream of a 3-day conquest turned into a nightmare lasting years. Still, even after so many failures, the same line keeps repeating. "Everything is going according to plan." A phrase that now sounds almost like a ritual chant, repeated for reassurance rather than truth. Today, Putin claims he's driven by compassion. "When we saw what they were doing to civilians, our hands itched to respond," he says. But the reality is that the only ones truly paying for this are the ordinary people, those sent to fight, those who lose loved ones, those whose voices are never heard.
"I'm ready to fight," he says, "but it will be your children and relatives who go to the front lines." His own family, of course, remains untouched. "Do you understand the difference?" he adds. And the difference is crystal clear. In the meantime, the justification machine grinds on. "We were deceived, we were betrayed. The promises about NATO were broken," he claims again. But betrayal, it seems, has become a universal excuse. While he tells his people stories of deceit from abroad, those same people at home live through daily deceit. Promises of safety, prosperity, and peace, all broken in turn. And while Putin's televised lines grow more repetitive, the world outside moves on. Ukrainian drones strike targets far beyond the front lines. In the Mediterranean, a tanker belonging to Russia's Shadow Fleet burns after another drone attack. In the Caspian Sea, yet another oil platform is hit. The quiet war at sea intensifies, and for Moscow, it's a warning. Soon, there may be no one left to ship the oil, no wells left to extract it. Meanwhile, the stories from the ground grow even more tragic. The widow of a soldier killed near Kupiansk recounts her encounter with a commander. She told him her husband had been killed. The commander's reply was chilling in its indifference. "Don't worry, you'll find another one." Behind every such moment is an entire generation being consumed by this conflict, not for ideals, but for survival.
And still they are told to believe in victory, to trust the same words that have lost all meaning. While Russia buries its dead and silences its dissenters, its propaganda continues to project an image of strength and moral clarity. But beneath the surface, the cracks are widening. The promises of quick triumph have dissolved into years of blood, loss, and denial. And as the winter of 2025 deepens, even those who once believed begin to whisper, "How much longer can this go on?" Stay with us, friends. In the next part, we'll uncover how the Kremlin's carefully constructed facade continues to crumble, and what's really happening behind the closed doors of power. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Part 2. The picture becomes clearer when we begin to look behind the curtain, beyond the televised statements and ceremonial speeches. What has emerged over the past 3 years is not just a war, but a profound transformation of Russian society. A steady drift into silence, fear, and fatigue. The rhetoric that once stirred nationalism now sounds hollow, even to those who used to believe. People are growing weary of hearing the same speeches, the same reassurances that everything is under control, while daily life becomes harder, lonelier, and poorer. The slogans have lost their meaning, but they continue to echo because silence, for many, feels even more dangerous. In Moscow, the atmosphere has shifted. Conversations in cafes or on public transport fall silent when politics is mentioned. Even among those who once spoke proudly of the special operation, there's now hesitation in their voices. They've seen too many coffins return, too many faces disappear. Many families no longer know where their sons are or what happened to them. The official channels rarely show the reality on the ground, but the truth leaks through the cracks. Through whispered phone calls, through returning soldiers, through videos quietly shared online before being deleted. The illusion of unity is maintained by fear and repetition. Behind the Kremlin's marble walls, the leadership remains publicly confident but privately uncertain. Reports circulate about growing disagreements among key figures, between the military command and the security apparatus, between the technocrats who manage the economy and the political elite trying to preserve loyalty. They know that the longer this conflict drags on, the harder it becomes to justify. Russia's economy, though still functioning, is held together by improvisation. The sanctions didn't break it overnight, but they forced the country into dependence on new partners: China, Iran, North Korea. Relationships that come with heavy costs. Moscow presents these ties as strategic triumphs, but in reality, they reflect a shrinking circle of options. Even as Putin continues to frame the war as a fight against Western aggression, his own citizens face an invisible battle at home: the erosion of rights, of hope, of normal life. New laws tighten control over speech and thought. Words once spoken freely are now punishable. Independent journalists have been silenced, forced into exile, or imprisoned under vague accusations of discrediting the army. The remaining media speak in one voice, repeating carefully crafted phrases, while entire regions sink deeper into neglect. In cities like Belgorod, explosions are no longer shocking. They are part of the routine. Life continues, but under a constant shadow. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the resilience has astonished the world. Cities that were supposed to fall within days, Kiev, Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, remain standing. Reconstruction begins even as sirens wail. Volunteers deliver aid, teachers return to classrooms, and soldiers hold the lines with unwavering resolve. The story Putin wanted to write, of a divided Ukraine collapsing under pressure, never came true. Instead, his invasion forged a new sense of unity among Ukrainians, a determination stronger than any speech. Western nations, though cautious, have sustained their support. Weapons, humanitarian aid, and intelligence continue to flow,
ensuring that Ukraine can resist, even as fatigue grows in Europe and the United States. In the European Union, economic challenges and the energy crisis have reshaped priorities. Across Germany, France, and Italy, citizens are asked to save electricity, limit heating, and adjust to rising prices. Cities dim their Christmas lights earlier than before, an eerie symbol of restraint. Commentators on Russian state television mock this darkening of Europe, portraying it as proof of the West's decline. Yet behind that narrative lies anxiety. Europe may be dimming its lights, but it still stands united, still supplies arms, still imposes sanctions that quietly suffocate Russia's long-term prospects. Inside Russia, propaganda insists that the country is thriving despite the collective West. Officials boast of rising agricultural production, new trade routes through Asia, and growing domestic industry. But in reality, factories work with outdated machinery, imported parts are scarce, and inflation quietly eats away at household budgets. The ruble's fluctuations no longer make headlines. People have simply adjusted to instability. What once would have caused outrage now passes as normal. The government's solution to unrest is distraction, new patriotic events, films glorifying the army, school lessons rewriting recent history. The contradictions are glaring. While deputies of the ruling party propose abolishing the requirement to declare their income for security reasons, ordinary citizens face stricter audits and fewer social benefits. When asked about this, one lawmaker said, "It's about the safety of our people," but everyone knows whose safety he meant. The distance between the powerful and the powerless has never been wider. In Yaroslavl Oblast, when villagers asked their governor for basic needs, gas pipelines, an internet connection, a repaired road, they were told it was not worth the effort. The message was clear: you are forgotten. And yet these are the same citizens called upon to sacrifice, to send their sons to war, to remain loyal. The disillusionment spreads quietly, not through protests, but through withdrawal. People stop watching the news, they stop believing. They focus on survival, feeding their families, keeping warm, avoiding attention. For some, it's easier to believe the official story than to confront the painful truth. For others, especially the younger generation, it's impossible to accept the lies any longer. They find fragments of truth on foreign platforms, in encrypted chats, in conversations whispered late at night. But they know the risks. Meanwhile, Ukraine continues to strike deeper into Russian-controlled territories and beyond. The attack on the tanker in the Mediterranean was not just symbolic. It demonstrated that no corner of Russia's global operations is untouchable. The hit on the Caspian oil platform marked another escalation, targeting the economic foundation that funds the war. For the Kremlin, these are not just losses, but humiliations, each one undermining the image of strength that has been so carefully maintained. Yet in public, officials smile, saying everything is under control, that these are minor setbacks. The facade holds, but only barely. And as these realities unfold, there's another story, one often overlooked, the story of the women left behind, wives, mothers, and daughters of soldiers who never returned. Many of them believed in the promises, housing, benefits, respect. Instead, they found themselves alone, struggling to pay off loans for apartments that were never built, fighting with corrupt developers who vanished after collecting payments. In Rostov Oblast, dozens of such families are now demanding justice. "We have been left without homes and without hope," one woman says. "We are paying for something that doesn't exist." Their letters to the president go unanswered. The few who speak out publicly face harassment from local authorities. The grief has become part of daily life. People no longer expect truth, only endurance. Yet the questions remain, whispered, unspoken but powerful. How did it come to this? How did promises of greatness lead to such despair? Stay with us. In the final part, we'll explore the wider implications of this growing disillusionment. what it means for Russia's future, how the world is responding, and what new realities may emerge as this long war reshapes everything we thought we knew. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for the conclusion of this report. Part 3. As the months pass and the seasons turn, the consequences of this prolonged war reach far beyond the front lines. What began as a regional invasion has reshaped global politics, economies, and alliances. Yet, in Russia itself, the transformation is perhaps the most dramatic. Once projected as a nation of rising strength, it now exists in a strange duality, outwardly defiant, inwardly fractured. The state maintains its image of control, but underneath that image lies a deep uncertainty, a fear of what will happen when the silence finally breaks. The war has become not just a military confrontation, but a system of governance, one that depends on endless mobilization, endless justification, endless enemies. Across Russian cities, there's an uneasy calm. Billboards still display patriotic slogans, and state television continues its narrative of heroism and destiny. But when the cameras are off, people speak differently. In St. Petersburg, taxi drivers lower their voices when discussing politics, glancing at their phones as if they might be listening. In small towns, mothers gather to share stories of sons who were sent on rotation months ago and never returned. The official channels say they are heroes, but no one will explain where they are buried or why their names are missing from public memorials. The absence has become the loudest sound in the country. The Kremlin insists that life goes on, that the economy is adapting, that the country is stronger than ever. On paper, numbers show growth, rising trade with China, new factories opening, new rail routes through Central Asia. But these statistics conceal the truth. The growth is artificial, built on state spending, on military contracts, on desperation. Consumer goods are scarcer, wages stagnate, and imported products vanish from the shelves. The middle class that once defined urban Russia is shrinking, its savings eroded, its dreams fading. Those who can leave do so quietly. Engineers, IT specialists, doctors, taking with them not only skills, but hope. Meanwhile, the government seeks legitimacy through spectacle. Massive parades, patriotic concerts, exhibitions of captured equipment, all designed to reassure the public that everything remains under control. But even the performances feel forced. The faces in the crowds look tired, the applause mechanical. A recent attempt to revive enthusiasm through a national renewal campaign fell flat. The slogans no longer inspire. People understand that these shows are not for them, but for the cameras. The distance between words and reality has become too wide to ignore. In contrast, Ukraine, despite its devastation, has found renewed unity. The rebuilding of infrastructure in cities like Kherson and Kharkiv is slow but determined. Schools reopen amid ruins, volunteers rebuild bridges, and local officials speak of a new beginning. Western nations continue their support, though the political winds shift occasionally in Washington and Brussels. The long war has tested alliances, but it has also clarified them. Europe, once divided over energy dependence and internal politics, now speaks with a more coherent voice about security and resilience. The lessons learned from this conflict will shape European defense policies for decades to come. Internationally, the ripple effects continue to spread. Oil markets fluctuate with every drone strike, every naval incident. The shadow fleet that once helped Russia bypass sanctions now operates under constant threat as Ukrainian and Western intelligence track its movements. Insurance costs for tankers have soared, and fewer companies are willing to risk association with sanctioned entities. Meanwhile, the destruction of platforms in the Caspian Sea underscores a growing vulnerability, not just militarily, but economically. Energy exports, once the cornerstone of Moscow's global power, now face unpredictable disruption. Within Russia's borders, the social consequences are profound. Entire regions are losing their male population. In some rural areas of the Urals and Siberia, women outnumber men by a staggering margin, and the economy struggles to function. The government's solution has been to import labor from Central Asia, but even that is proving unsustainable. Discrimination, poor living conditions, and unpaid wages drive many migrants away. The sense of national unity that officials constantly invoke exists only on television. On the streets, the reality is one of isolation and quiet despair. In Moscow, there is talk, still whispered, about what happens after Putin. No one dares to predict when or how such a transition might occur, but everyone senses that the system cannot sustain itself indefinitely. Power in Russia has always depended on fear and spectacle, but the longer the war drags on, the harder it becomes to maintain both. The president still appears regularly on television, calm and confident, but even his most loyal audiences now detect fatigue. The once commanding voice now carries the weight of repetition. The elite, too, are restless. Some seek to secure their wealth abroad through complex schemes, hiding assets through relatives and offshore networks. Others quietly reposition themselves, preparing for the future, whatever it may look like. The inner circle remains united in public, but divided in private. The fear of instability binds them together, yet that same fear may soon tear them apart. The next political crisis in Russia will not come from protest in the streets, but from within the corridors of power. At the same time, Russian culture, long a space for reflection and dissent, has retreated into shadows. Writers, filmmakers, and musicians who once spoke boldly now either censor themselves or leave the country. The once vibrant art scene in Moscow and St. Petersburg has been replaced by officially approved works celebrating traditional values and spiritual strength. Yet underground voices persist in online communities, in private exhibitions, in songs shared discreetly among friends. Art, as always, finds a way to survive even under repression. And so the narrative continues: a war without victory, a leader without accountability, a society trapped between pride and exhaustion. Every few months, new declarations are made about negotiations, about peace, about the possibility of compromise. But behind these announcements lies a simple truth: the war has become the foundation of the current system, and ending it would mean acknowledging failure. The government cannot afford that, not politically, not psychologically. For the international community, the challenge remains immense. Sanctions strain global trade, energy prices fluctuate, and the humanitarian crisis deepens. Millions of refugees still live in temporary housing across Europe. The United Nations continues to call for ceasefire talks, but trust is absent on all sides. The scars of this conflict will not fade quickly, and the rebuilding, both physical and moral, will take generations. As for Russia, its future is uncertain. It stands at a crossroads between transformation and isolation. The question is whether its people, after years of silence and propaganda, will find the strength to demand truth, not from the outside world, but from themselves. Every empire eventually faces the moment when illusion can no longer sustain reality. For Russia, that moment is approaching. In the end, this story is not only about one leader or one war. It's about a nation caught in the cycle of history, repeating